Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel and you're watching The Brown Feminist. In today's video, which is episode 2 of our interview question series, we will be discussing more real interview questions for clinical research coordinators. Now, if you recall, in the last episode of this series, I had talked to you about how I went through an interview process for a hospital-based research institute in Ottawa. And of all the different types of roles that clinical research coordinators do, some have a more clinical or nursing lean, some have a more like data analytical lean, some have a more like clinical trial coordinator and regulatory lean. So this particular job, if you remember, had more of a nursing clinical lean. So for this one, the first step that I did for this position was to do a phone screen interview with somebody who was more of an HR person. So if you haven't watched this video, make sure to watch this. I will link it down below and up here. It's really important that you watch them chronologically to kind of understand how the questions become more in-depth and more specific as you go on interviewing multiple times for the same role. Once that one was done and that interview and I had made it through to the second round, I did what was an virtual interview with the direct hiring managers, which means the direct managers who would be supervising me or supervising my role. I met with two individuals. Obviously, we're not going to be naming the exact institute or the exact people, but both of them had like slightly different roles. One was more senior managerial person who looked over the entire kind of research and trials division, and the other one was like more of a project manager or like a trials manager who just looked after the clinical trials at this organization. So I had a wonderful virtual interview as well. So in this video today, I'm going to be enacting some of the questions and answers, and these are all real questions, how they asked them and how I answered them. I'm not going to obviously do the entirety of it because it was like a 45-minute long interview, but I wanted to show you at least like 10-15-minute clips of what went on, what kind of questions were asked and how I answered them, so that maybe it can help you in preparing for your future interviews as clinical research coordinators. So without further ado, let's get into it. As we go on through these interview questions and answers, I will be stopping and pausing to give you guys some tips and tricks of how I kind of prepared for it, or what exact strategy I was using. So first of all, tip number 1, before we even start the QA round, is do your research. As soon as I had received kind of the link containing like the Zoom link or the Microsoft Teams link for the interview a few days in advance, I looked up who were the people who had been invited to that meeting. I had their full names and email addresses. So the thing that I did is I went onto Google, I went onto LinkedIn, and I looked up these people. Who were they? What was their role in the organization? And based on that, I could understand what kind of questions they were more likely to answer me. If these people had a more clinical nursing background, they might be asking me more medical questions. If these people had a more like principal investigator background or more of like a biomedical sciences background, or they were doing particularly clinical trials, were they physicians, who were they? And based on that, I could understand kind of the depth and breadth of like the questions they would be asking me. Would they be asking me like all the different kind of things I've done, all the clinical knowledge I have, the licensures I have, or all of the kind of, handling and understanding of regulatory requirements that runs clinical trials, whether I can do like large scale projects. Is their team size big or small? In bigger teams, people usually want you to take on more niche, specialized roles, whereas in smaller teams, they want to hire people who are like willing to multitask several different divisions. They might not have a dedicated person just to look after like trial budgets and finances. They might need you to take on some of the invoicing responsibilities and the research ethics responsibilities. Whereas in bigger team sizes, you can often see that the managers, they're taking over like the invoicing, finances, and REB applications, and you're particularly only dedicated to maybe the screening and consenting, maybe the just the consenting and like follow-ups and the visits and assessments and interventions for all the patients. So you might have like more niche roles in bigger teams. So now tip number 1 is to do your research. Now, tip number 2 is actually to make sure you show up on that link a couple of minutes ahead of time. not 30 minutes, not 15 minutes. Just show up 3 to 5 minutes ahead of time so they know that you're serious. If it was a real in-person interview, you would have been kind of in the hallway, kind of figuring out the building and where to wait a few minutes early, right? So do the exact same thing so they know kind of how punctual you are. Sometimes they won't let you into the meeting earlier, but you can just kind of click on the link and like load, and they'll know that you're there. And even if they're late, it's no problem. But as a candidate, you should be early. Oh, hi, Farzana. I'm so sorry we ran a few minutes late. I hope we didn't keep you waiting for too long. We were just finishing up another meeting. Oh, no problem at all. It's really nice to meet both of you. Okay, wonderful. So let me start by introducing myself and my colleagues. So my name is Jane, and I am the project manager of the Clinical Trials Unit here at the XXX Research Institute. And with me today, I have my colleague, the Clinical Trials Manager, who will be directly supervising the role that you were interviewing for. Yeah, so her name is Anna, and I guess I will let her introduce herself some more when she gets to ask you some questions. So it's really nice to meet both of you, Jane and Anna. So tip number 3 is to recognize who they are by their names, and kind of even in the camera looking towards each of them, trying to engage and calling them out by their names. It shows that like you're really tapping into the conversation and you're very present. Wonderful. So Farzana, let's not waste any time. Why don't you start with telling us a little bit about why you are interested in this role, and then we can kind of catch up and go into each of the more detailed questions we have for you today. Sure, yeah, I'd love to tell you. So I have been working in research for over 5 years now, and I've worked in various different roles, from like basic science research laboratories and wet lab environments to, working as a research assistant, both in clinical trials that are physician-led, observational cohorts, as well as in clinical trials. Even in my last role, I worked as a research coordinator on multiple pharma-sponsored clinical trials, but I also have experience more hands-on with physician-led clinical trials, which need like provincial ethics approvals and funding and all that kind of approval under clinicaltrials.gov. So I have all of that experience, and then when I was transitioning more into like being able to be, enrich myself with the skills to excel long-term in clinical trials, I felt that having a nursing or clinical background would really help. So I did go back and do some additional schooling, and now I'm a registered nurse, so I can do a lot of these controlled acts when it comes to these as well. So I have the research background, I have a lot of the administrative knowledge, and now I'm able to do a lot of the clinical side of things, including all of the assessments, any kind of drug interventions, venipunctures, blood work, all of those things, even point of care testing. I had noticed in your job advertisement that you'd mentioned that there would be some neurocognitive testing, which is like a more specialized assessment that we don't normally do on the wards. And I would love to get trained on those as well. I'm sure I can pick it up pretty fast as an RN, and kind of help with those assessments as well. Okay, yeah, that's really good to know. So let me get into some of the more nitty-gritties now. Can you tell me what experience do you have with regards to research ethics applications, REB stuff? Yes, absolutely. So I have a lot of experience with research ethics boards. I've done like full-on initial ethics applications. I've done amendments. I've done renewals. I've done like minimal risk research applications, as well as like maximum full board reviews. I know how to like liaise with the REBs of different institutions, and how to like report when there's like a protocol deviation and SAE or any of those kind of issues. So I am very familiar with the research ethics board process. In the last role that I was at in XX Hospital, they actually share like a REB that goes across like all 3 of their campuses. So I've had the opportunity to work with like their online integrated system, but before that there was a time that ethics applications were more manually done, and handed in kind of like written or signed and scanned. So I have experience in both models as well. Okay, very good. So let's give you a scenario. Let's say that you are coordinating a clinical trial, and all of a sudden you find out that there has been a protocol deviation, something has gone wrong. So how would you go about it? What are the steps that you would take? How would you manage the situation? Sure, Jane. Yeah, that's an excellent question. So let me just start by saying that first and foremost, my concern in this scenario would be patient safety, especially if it's like an interventional drug trial and in some kind of an intervention has been given to them. My number one concern would be kind of looking towards finding out if the patient has experienced any kind of adverse effects or serious or severe or related adverse events, and kind of making sure they have received whatever kind of medical treatments they need, making sure they know the resources to connect with, and that it has been mitigated, it has been addressed, and they have received any kind of management that they require. The second thing would obviously or concurrently be, I would definitely inform the investigators or sub-investigators of the study and let them know that this is the kind of adverse event that has taken place. If they think that anything more needs to be offered, this patient is eligible, no longer eligible, or anything else in the protocol needs to be modified as a result of this potential SAE. So these were like the first two things that I would do. And then if it has indeed been an SAE, then definitely there are forms to fill out for SAE reporting. And depending on how serious it is, if it's death, if it requires hospitalization, if it requires like a procedure being done to stabilize the patient, the PI and I would like work together to fill out to assess what we know from their medical records, and then fill out the SAE forms, let the sponsors know, and when relevant, let the REB know, let the regulatory authorities know, or make sure that the sponsor has informed the regulatory authorities, whether it's Health Canada or it's FDA or whoever it is in that state. And of course, if there's been the SAE or whatever has been caused as a result of a protocol deviation, to identify if it was a minor deviation, then kind of just charting it and letting the sponsors know, putting it in the EDC. If it's been a major deviation that could potentially impact patient health or safety, or if it could impact data integrity, to let like the broader research team and PI team know, as well as the REB know. And of course, there are like specialized forms to fill out in case of PDs and SAEs. So obviously doing all of that documentation meticulously. Some of them come like with time restrictions. Like if it's a severe adverse event, there's like a 24 to 48 hour, time limitation in certain institutions, or it could be like 7 days to inform your regulatory authority. Just keeping all of these things in mind. So I think there's a series of actions that I would have taken, but it would all have started with like ensuring patient safety. And then like obviously inform the people I need to inform. Third thing would be paperwork. And then obviously, like once some little bit of time has passed and things have settled, just to go back and review and reassess, like why did this protocol deviation take place? Why did this adverse event take place? Is there something we could have done differently? And how to make sure that going forward, this doesn't happen. If this happened because of a lack of training in the research team, if that happened because of a breakdown in communication, like whatever the issue was, some logistical issue, we need to ensure that this does not happen again. And actually that contingency plan needs to be developed immediately if it's not already in place, and it has to be informed as part of the PD and SSE documentation that yes, these have been identified and rectified so they don't repeat themselves again. Of course, at the end of the day, a lot of these might need to be recorded both on the patient's EMR, depending on the hospital system, but as well as on the EDC for the pharma sponsors if they're involved. Okay, great. So that's it from me today, Farzana. I'm just gonna pass on to my colleague Anna, and she can ask you some more of the questions that are more related to her team's daily functions. For me, I just look more at like the REB and the overviews of everything. Okay, great, thank you. So you can take over, Anna. Hi, Farzana. I think Jane's done a great job of introducing me already. But once again, I am Anna. I would be directly supervising this role as a clinical trial manager at the CTRs. I do take care of a big team. I have several research coordinators working under me and with me, and I'm here to support them. And each of them have in turn like several different projects that they are helping to recruit for, and they're helping to assess for, do follow-ups, do interventions, and all of that. I am the kind of go-to person for all the research coordinators with regards to like any ethics questions, any logistical issues, any protocol deviations, and that kind of stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and ask you my questions. So for my first question, let's say that you are in charge of meeting the recruitment target of a large number of projects. And of them, one of them you're like really struggling to recruit for. You're not being able to meet your recruitment target over a few weeks. So what are the strategies that you will use to fix the situation? How will you go about ensuring that you can recruit for these roles? Hi, Anna. Thanks for your question. So I think the first thing that I like to do is to take a look at the study protocol and just look through very thoroughly the inclusion and exclusion criteria. Sometimes they can be stringent. Sometimes it can just be the nature of the study and the population they're trying to recruit that might make the pool of candidates very limiting. I think it's important to like make a thorough assessment of the requirements with the inclusion and exclusion criteria and the actual population available to us at the site at the very beginning of the study. Sometimes I have been part of studies where they had like so many very specific inclusion and exclusion criteria that even within the whole site, like the maximum we could possibly recruit in a year would be like 10 participants. And it's important to have that conversation and convey that with pharma sponsors to set fair expectations. Now, having said that, there are times when the expectations are pretty reasonable. However, we might still be struggling to recruit and meeting our targets. In those cases, there's a lot of ways to kind of, re-strategize and go back to our recruitment board. One of the things that I have done in the past is basically expand the pool of recruitment. So if we were recruiting from within one clinic or one specialty within our hospital institute, I would try to like think and discuss with my team and with the investigators if maybe we're missing out on some people. Maybe there are some outpatient clinics associated with the hospital site still within the same institute, or there are some other departments where these patients might be kind of coming in and leaving the hospital and we're like not being able to meet them through just that one department. In those cases, affiliations can be set up within the hospital and with different PIs to allow us to approach their patients as well for these kind of cross reference or like cross department research initiatives and kind of approach them for recruitment. So that pool can definitely be expanded. One of the things that we had done in one of my past roles is we were missing a lot of people coming in from other regions into like the ER, or they were skipping the ER and getting direct admission because they had already maybe been coming in from a regional hospital's internal departments. In those cases, we set up kind of a system where me as the research coordinator and my team were getting CC'd on handover reports from residents and fellows. So we could like kind of continue screening through people from multiple departments, not just our own, and make sure if we're like missing any patient IDs who also meet our inclusion and exclusion criteria. So there's like a variety of things we can do. Just depending, we can like advertise, give posters, screen out, depending on the ethics, depending on the budget. There's a lot of strategies that could be utilized. Okay, wonderful. I like that. I like that you would use a couple of different strategies. Yeah. So for Zana, can you tell me how you like view yourself multitasking and managing a lot of competing deadlines and responsibilities in a week? Like sometimes, how do you make sure you're on top of it all? What is the system that you use to stay organized? So this is a wonderful question. I know everyone has like their own style. For me, I like to use a few different strategies to stay organized and on top of all of my deadlines. One of them is kind of to do a beginning of week like assessment of like my calendar, very elaborate calendar that I maintain, and just look at everything that needs to be done that week and everything that needs to be done the next week, and set like realistic goals that within this day, even if I have a ton of meetings, even if I have like a ton of liaising email stuff to do, I will get at least this one thing done. I will get at least this one thing done. And then when I'm doing this like beginning of week assessment, if I feel like, oh my God, this day I have like 7 things and I know that 1 or 2 are gonna fall like through the I'm gonna miss out on them. Even if I work like a 10-hour day, I won't be able to do all of the things that need to be done on that day. It's important like on that Monday to plan for that Friday and have a conversation with my manager or with my team and see if somebody else in the team is free enough to be tapped in to delegate some of the tasks to them, or to ask for a reprioritization of those 6 tasks and go like, are there any 4 that really need to be done by Friday, and are there any 1 or 2 that can be done a day before or like a few days after? So it's just really important to set like these realistic expectations to myself and to my team and to my manager constantly, especially when you're juggling a lot of things. The other really important thing I feel that I kind of mentioned as well is as research coordinators, beyond our own kind of daily task, we are the point of contact for so many studies and so many departments of our organizations or outside of organizations. So sometimes we don't always estimate the time that it takes in like doing emails and phone calls and answering questions and just doing the back and forth liaising with other organizations, or like even within staff members, helping train new people and stuff. So while I do like chart out time, like, okay, today I'll spend like the first 3 hours of the morning doing the email responses and doing all my phone calls and doing all my answers, I have to get at least this 1 or 2 things done for my own work so I don't fall behind. And if that means, the last 2 hours of my workday, I'm not constantly replying to emails, and that's okay. Those can be answered like the beginning of the next workday. So it's like really important for me to like chunk out how much time I'm going to use for communication and how much time I'm going to use for like getting paperwork done that might have a strict deadline attached to it, like an RAB renewal, which is due very soon. Okay, yeah, these sound like some very neat tricks. Sounds like you've really given it some thought and you have your own system. And it is fair sometimes. That's why we have a big team here, that you can tag team each other. You can come discuss with your manager, and you can go back and we can see if any other teammate has a little room to take on a little bit of your load for a given day. And of course, it's expected that you would also do the same for them. We work as a team here. Farzana, can you tell me, or can you elaborate a little bit more about your clinical skills? Like, what kind of assessments have you done in the past? What are your experiences so far in nursing? Sure, yeah, absolutely. Nursing is my jam. As an RN, I'm very excited to share that I can do all the general like head to toe assessments, vitals, all of that. Like when I was working in neuro, I was doing like ASHA assessments. When I was working in ortho, I was doing like more specific things there. I worked in peds, so I did like all of my different placements. I did my consolidations. I did my clinical externship. So depending on the population, I have like learned to do like a lot of the focus assessments as well. And of course, like I was saying, like I can take up neurocognitive testing training and like pick up on those new assessments very fast as well. In terms of interventions, I can obviously do like all kinds of like drug administration, including like IV, putting them in and like maintaining them, doing infusions. I've worked with PICC lines, I've worked with trachs, I've done like a variety of things. For both children and adults, I've done like bowel prep, enemas, oral, sub-Q, whatever you expect, like definitely all of that. And yeah, like I think it's quite varied, but I'm definitely able to like retouch base and get some extra training and like do more very niche and focused assessments that you would need me to do. I can do any kind of venipuncture, blood work, through PICCs, or sometimes through IVs, through bone, depending on the criticalness of the situation. Definitely all of that. With my RN licensure, I'm able to do these control acts as well. So that was it for my video today, you guys. I'm not gonna go into the whole discussion of this interview. Of course, there was a part where I was asking them questions and they were asking me questions. It was a good back and forth. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you've been able to kind of catch on to how to engage. If there is no exact right and wrong for most of these answers, but they want to see how you think and how you can handle pressure and how you can handle multitasking, and if you have some of your own styles and strategies of working and all of that. And of course, they would love to have somebody with a little bit of niche clinical knowledge, a little bit of niche like knowledge and background in research, somebody who's done some REB work. By the time you're a research coordinator, you should have some experience, as opposed to research assistants. Sometimes they're willing to expect like, okay, you're a newcomer, you have to be trained from scratch. So I hope you will hit like if you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to hit subscribe to my channel, and there will be many more real interview questions and samples coming up. And that's because I have done a whole bunch of interviews myself before taking on my new latest role, and more on that in the next video. Until next time, bye.